my love for the Maserati Grand Sport is renowned. However, my love for getting my kids through college and making money on cars is also renowned, so I sold it. After selling it, I was so bereft that I bought this 4200. Does the 4200 CambioCorsa compare to the Grand Sport? This is the video you've been waiting for.
Come on, go!
My name's Tim. I'm a musician, a car collector, an automotive journalist, and a lover of all things automotive. I've bought and sold collectible cars for 2 decades, and I hope my experiences and my point of view helps you find the car of your dreams. Whether it's an F430, a Maserati Gran Turismo, an Alfa Romeo 8C, or a Maserati 4200, CambioCorsa, GT, or Grand Sport, or even a Quattroporte 5, the Ferrari F136 is the secret sauce that make these cars absolutely unforgettable. I thought I'd take this opportunity to highlight some of the differences in the cars, and the interior is definitely where there's some drastic differences. This car has an armrest, the whole center console has a nav. If you remember from my old one, I really wished I had the leather headliner. Things like this visor are very easy to break. Anything that you see inside this car that is black was covered with the stickiest of sticky Ferrari stickies, including the entire steering column, which is more shiny now because I've taken the sticky off. And honestly, it was a big improvement. Other than sticky bits, exterior plastics also suffer on most Maseratis and Ferraris, like this windowsill. These cars actually started out in life back in the 90s as a Giugiaro-designed 3200. That then became the 4200, which by 05 and 06, and this car's in 05, the CambioCorsa and GT shared almost everything, including front and rear bumpers, with the Grand Sport and Super Limited Edition MC Victory. The only real differences were the splitter on the bottom of the front bumper and the sail panels on the rockers of the car. You guys have been waiting an awful long time for this review of my Maserati 4200 and Argento Luna. I really like the color. I bought the car pretty much completely based on the color combo. So do I love it? I guess that's the question. Do I love the car? Yes and no. As you know, I'm a huge fan of the Grand Sport 4200, like in general. This car is no exception. The sound of these cars is absolutely intoxicating. You have to spend an exponent of the money to get anything that performs or sounds like this car. I consider it to be the new golden age of Maserati, really. That's really what this car represents, is your opportunity to sort of buy into that great era. And I mean, I think the Quattroporte 5, if you've watched my video there, the Quattroporte 5 is also an amazing car. But enough talk. Let's drive this car. Let's talk about it. So first off, it sounds amazing. I mean, there's very little difference, between this and the Grand Sport in terms of engine tuning. I mentioned in my Grand Sport video that the engines are balanced and blueprinted, and they go like that little bit of extra mile. I think I said, and I should rewatch my own video, but I believe that I said that the Grand Sport was a bunch of little tweaks that made the 4200 perfect. Well, I was right, and I think the downfall of this car, realistically, or where this car is let down, is that it's not a Grand Sport. There's certain things about this car that I actually prefer. I wish the Grand Sport had the armrest. I'm using the armrest in this car right now, and maybe that's like an old man thing, but it's a thing. So like armrest, big plus on the 4200. Now, if you could care less about an armrest, then honestly, The seats are better in the Grand Sport, and pretty much everything you touch, there's less sticky bits in the Grand Sport. But this car dynamically, I have this car lowered, so I Grand Sported this car essentially. So it's got Grand Sport wheels. I upgraded the brake pads. The brakes on this car are amazing. They're more bitey than my Grand Sport ever was. More bitey even than the 8C I recently drove. Overall, this car is a super solid performer. The diff, which honestly is one of my favorite things about the Grand Sport, and gear ratios are, I would say, almost identical in this car. The ride-to-slide ability of this car is on par with the Grand Sport. What is not on par with the Grand Sport, if you listen to these downshifts, is it's a little bit slower. The TCU tune is just a little bit less fantastic. And even though we're talking about margins or like very, very small things, it's unbelievable that tenths or thousandths of a second could really matter that much. But as I stick this car in this corner and really go for it here, and I apologize, I got some stuff in the car, I should have thought about that. But, it's still really nice. I really apologize about the groceries, but the one thing I'd say is, unless you're full on going for it, absolutely full blast, it's not quite as sweet as the Grand Sport. Listen to these upshifts. Okay. Now, that's still brilliant. I don't not enjoy the car, but I would say the one thing, if and I have not found someone to do this on this car yet, TCU tune. It needs the Grand Sport TCU tune. It's funny to say that something that simple could be a game changer, but even the clutch in the 8C is amazing. The way that car steps off the line. And this car, again, it is essentially the Grand Sport. You've got that engine, you've got that noise. And again, making an appearance here in this car are Fab Speed secondary cat deletes, and I've just deleted the rear mufflers. So it only has a resonator on this car, which, to me, honestly, there's no real significant drone. As far as niggles, I did not see this car before I picked it up. I had a friend look at it, and honestly, for what I paid for the car and for the color combination, it's in great condition. So I should be thrilled, and I am thrilled. There's just some things with the car. I do wish, a lot of you guys have asked about maintenance and about longevity and those sorts of things. I'm about to turn 40,000. Actually, I'm going to turn 40,000 miles while we chat here. I'll have to grab a video of that. I've put maybe 6,000 miles. I haven't put a ton of miles on this car. Maybe even a little bit less than that. And it's been a great car. What I would say is that for a car with 40,000 miles, it has had a clutch. And I can guarantee that the person that owned this before me drove it in automatic most of the time. It just has that vibe. Again, if you drive it in sport with MSP off, it's a party all the time. So I have not, clutch wear has stayed the same through my 6,000 miles or so it sounds fantastic. But again, that little slower, a little bit slower shift. So it's still not horrible, but I would say even the way in sport, the way it steps off the line, you have to really stab at the throttle or sort of feather the throttle to get it off the line smoothly, whereas in the Grand Sport, it's a much easier operation. You really, I said in the Grand Sport video that you have to drive it like it's a manual. You really have to drive this one like it's a manual. If you're, like in that 20% throttle, which a lot of times, you are. So as far as, highlights, the value on the 4200 is ridiculous. And there are a lot more color combinations out there than you see on the Grand Sport. I've seriously thought about keeping this car and throwing some carbon chairs in it because the MC Victory interior is amazing. The GS interior is that little bit better. This does have the leather roof liner, which again I mentioned my Grand Sport did not have, and I really always missed. It is so worth it. It is amazing. I love it. Niggles are, for 40,000 miles. There's some things on this car. The wear on the suspension bits. This car looked like it probably was driven in the rain. Definitely never in the snow. It's just, some of the bushings are expired. Now, you're not really feeling any of that. In fact, the only thing you're feeling, or if you touch the suspension, weirdly the sway bar end links are there's a little bit of play in that. So I'm going to be doing some service on the car over the winter, and I've had this car. I think I've had this car for 3 years now. I'd need to look, but I think it's 3 years. And I mean, it is one of those cars that every time I get in this car, it makes me smile. I love the way they look. This is an 0506 car, so it has the the rear bumper of the Grand Sport, the front bumper of the Grand Sport. The lower lip is different between the Grand Sport, and the MC Victory. And it doesn't have the sail panels on the rockers. You could easily get those. There's enough of these cars in breaking yards that you could find those bits. I kind of like the way this car looks as it is, especially I lowered a little bit, so I don't know that I really want to change anything. I'll say this, I also don't know that it's going to be a long-term fleet stayer. So that does sound good. Because I think I'm going to try to find something else. And at this point, I've been doing this thing where I just buy another car. I really need to be a responsible adult and actually sell a car to get another car. So, because I'll tell you, for those of you that watch the channel, the number of cars that you should have at any one time, 12 to 15 is a really nice number. Anything over that, which I am consistently well over that, is kind of a frustration. I mean, I just find, like, I've driven my 155 once this year. I've driven my Cosworth once or twice, maybe 3 times this year. This car I've driven maybe 3 or 4 times this year. There's some of the cars are, I don't know, I find myself driving them more. The 4C I drove quite a bit this year. The Bentley I drive almost as a daily. So, yeah. It's interesting, and I don't know, this car, one of these cars I think will always be part of the fleet. The question is, I always go back to, there was, when I bought my gray Grand Sport, there was a burgundy Grand Sport that it was just, the color was amazing, the spec was just absolutely perfect, and I always had wished I bought that car. And I kind of still have a hankering for that exact car. So there's a possibility. Oh, I love the way this thing sounds. Even not driving aggressively, it sounds absolutely brilliant. In terms of driving, here I'm coming to a stop. A lot of times I'll just throw it in neutral and coast to the stop. And like I said, I've had 0 additional clutch wear since I bought the car. Anyways, I could go on and on. Do you want a 4200 or a Grand Sport or an 8C or an MC Victory or some other variant of these cars in general, or even a Gran Turismo? As I said before, the Gran Turismo is too soft and sort of like a Quattroporte alternative, I think. These cars really hit a sweet spot for me, where it's kind of like that 911 alternative, but a little more convenient. It has a ton of back seat room. The 4200 is a more comfortable car. The additional sticky bits, and there's a lot of it in this car, and it's unfathomable still. And every time I do a video on one of these cars, It's just shocking to me that I love the steering rack. The steering rack in these cars. Every car should have a quick rack. If it's a performance car and it's got like a 14-to-1 rack, or this super long rack, they're doing it wrong. That's not right. Anyways, I think the Grand Sport, it's close enough in money to this that I would recommend still a Grand Sport. A good friend of mine has a manual, and I've spent a good amount of time in manuals on these now. I think the automated clutch thing, especially when you're really pushing, is the way for this car, because ultimately on back roads it makes it such a pleasure to be able to paddle shift. The paddles are great on this car, and so that's me. I really think that the manual, I would forego the manual on this car. I don't like the shift quality of the manual on these. I do somewhat fancy a manual convertible. The convertibles have slightly shorter wheelbase, and I don't know, I think it's slightly more apropos. For clarification too on what is one of these with an exhaust sound like, or with a muffler delete, I'm at 80 miles an hour. There's some exhaust noise. If I really roll into it there, you can hear some exhaust noise. When I go under underpasses, the voice of God is reflected. I personally I think these should sound that way. The Grand Sport has a pretty great exhaust factory, and you really just need to delete those secondary cat deletes. Brings in a little more. You keep the primary cats, and you get a little more pop and snap and crackle and a little bit more rasp, which I personally like. I would go for the Grand Sport. I think the Grand Sport represents incredible value on these cars. I think that's the answer, is the Grand Sport. You probably already knew that the Grand Sport was my answer. If you find one of these and it's a great deal, the TCU tune thing is the biggest deal. If one of you guys knows, hey, this guy will do a TCU tune, so you have the Grand Sport tune, that's what this needs. It needs the Grand Sport tune. As far as the other stuff, the wheel rim is a little thinner on this car. I actually like the gauges more in this car. These cars are massively undervalued, so undervalued you won't even mind letting your kids or your kids' friends drive the car. You won't even think about it. More brake. More brake. Second. So which one should you buy? Price-wise, the Grand Sport really has everything you probably want in one of these cars. If you find a CambioCorsa for less, I'd say if you like the color combination, go for it, but just understand that you may not like the seats as much, and there's some fine tuning to the suspension, brakes, and definitely that transmission tune that you're going to want to do if you're a performance-oriented driver. The MC Victory doesn't really add any performance, but the seats are amazing, the spec is amazing. They're super limited edition. If you can find one for a little bit of a premium over a Grand Sport, go for an MC Victory. They're amazing cars. Now, the manual transmission, like I said, it's really not for me. If you really like a manual, I think it's a cool car to have in a manual, but it definitely changes the demeanor, takes away some of that edge. In terms of what to look out for, everyone freaks out about the clutches on these cars. The clutches are not that expensive, and if you drive it in sport and rarely, if ever, in automatic, you really won't have clutch wear issues, period. Things that you should look out for are things like heater cores. They pretty much all need replaced eventually on these cars, and it's a dash out type of procedure. Water pumps, oil pumps, bumps, those sorts of things are far more important to look at. Good oil change history is absolutely vital. A lot of people ask me, isn't the Gran Turismo newer and better? Well, yes, it's newer, but newer things aren't always better. And this car, it sits in a very special place in the automotive pantheon that really, there's nothing else. If you've watched my other video on the Grand Sport and you thought, oh, maybe I should get one of these cars, what are you waiting for? They're so undervalued, and I think it's one of the most hidden gem vehicles currently out there. Go get one.